What's up guys, it's Andy, and if you are here for part 2 of the 3-part series, me moving my horse, and part 2 of the series is going to be what to look for in a new barn when you're doing a barn search. And kind of the topics that go into that are going to be, what are you looking for, figuring out and deciding what you want, and then exploring the financials and what's included, scheduling tours, and then also creating questionnaires. Because if you are like me, you are terribly anxious and you really do not want to forget your questions when you go on your tour, because then that means you have to reach out and communicate even more, even with places that you maybe don't think you want to go to. So having a questionnaire is very easy to fill out while you're on the property, and people are super willing to answer your questions. So let's go ahead and get into this video on finding a new stable. Okay, so the first part of this video is going to be deciding what you want out of a stable and where you'd like to keep your horse. So the first thing is to decide, what do you want as a rider? Are you looking for a trainer? Are you looking to show? Are you looking to just have fun and ride on the trails? For me, I'm looking for a place that has the option for me to take lessons, but still gives me the independence of, I am the owner of the horse. I will do what I want with the horse and not have to be like confined to a program or anything like that, but still have the option to do that. I still have the option to do shows. I have the option to have people trailer us around. So that's what I was looking for in a barn when I started my search. Then you have to think about things that you want for your horse. So I knew for Gideon, I wanted a place that did group turnout with at least 2 other horses, if not more, in big pastures, no more round pen for him. I want him in an actual pasture with friends, with 24/7 access to hay when they are outside and inside. But now I knew no matter where I went, they needed to have hay outside. He needed to have friends so that he can decompress, and he needed room to move around, run around, you know. So those are the things I knew I wanted for Gideon and that were important to me for his well-being and his comfort. So that's something you have to take into account as well, not just what you want, but what's best for your horse, and maybe deciding what can you compromise on that, you know, compromise for yourself in order to give your horse what you're looking for. That's another thing to look at, is deciding what are things you could compromise on. For me, a huge thing I wanted was to be able to jump on my own, not having to be in a lesson or anything like that. But if I found the right farm and Gideon was gonna be super happy, that's something I was willing to compromise on, because I can always pay for a lesson or 2 here or there, or trailer to places where I could jump or do something like that. There are options, and so you have to decide, what are you willing to compromise on, what are you not willing to compromise on, and make sure you stick to your guns on that. I think that's the most important part of this whole section of deciding what you want. You have to know what you want down to the details, and you need to be very stringent on them and stick to those guidelines and really stick to what you are willing to compromise on and what you're not, because you could end up at a place that's worse than where you're at, or even less what you're looking for than where you're at, because you were just desperate to leave. And that is a bad mistake to make. I've been looking at barns since October of 2021. It's just about to be February. So, you know, it takes time, and especially now because so many people bought horses in the pandemic for some reason, that there's like no open boarding places and there's wait lists and all of that. So you have to be strict on what you're looking for and don't rush the process. Okay, so now you have found some prospective places that you're thinking you want to check out. So what do we do first? Well, I like to think that most places have websites, or they have some sort of social media. So that is a good place to start. You want to find out as much information as you can before scheduling a tour, before making your questionnaire, so you kind of have an idea of what you're getting into, if it's worth it, if it's what you're looking for, and then you can ask some more of the nitty-gritty questions when you're on your tour and make it a little bit more personalized. So I have like a little list here that I'm going to be referring to, just things I've pulled off of my data collection sheets and my questionnaires that are going to hopefully help you guys think and brainstorm about certain things. Now, this is not an all-inclusive list. This is just things that I thought of, and I'm sure there's many other things out there too. I did use Google to try and help me formulate my questions and my train of thought. So this is kind of what I started with. So for costs and inclusions, you want to look at what is the cost of board itself, right? What is board? What does it include? What amenities does it include? Does it include grain? Does it include supplements? Do you have to worry about extra fees for things? We'll talk about extra fees. Then, is there a training requirement? This was like my next section. Do they require lessons? Do they require your horse be in training board? Do they have any sort of like activity requirement or anything like that? It's a simple yes or no on your questionnaire. They either do or they don't, and you can leave yourself some lines for details on what the minimum or maximum requirements are. Then you've got the next section is going to be farrier or vet. Questions to ask: does the barn have a barn farrier that's on a set schedule that you'll be joining that schedule? Most places will always let you use whatever vet or farrier you want, but if you want to be on a consistent schedule with the rest of the barn, you use the person that they assign. That's how it is currently where I'm at. It works just fine. As a matter of fact, I probably have more anxiety about having to set stuff up on my own moving forward here, but you know, see, do they even offer that? A lot of places I interviewed didn't offer that. They didn't even coordinate the twice a year vaccinations. Like, everything is on your own. The place that I'm going to be going to actually has deadlines, so you just have to submit your paperwork by those 2 deadlines, and as long as everything's met, then there's no problem. Otherwise, it incurs a fee for being late. So then you also have to look at extra fees. So this could be supplement feeding, giving medications, extra shavings if you want it, private turnout if you want it. Does it cost extra for them to put fly masks and do fly spray in the spring and summer? Does it cost extra for them to do blanketing in the winter? Or do they just do it automatically? So there's a lot of things that you can have extra fees for. So I would try and think of any and every little thing you can and see if there's an extra fee for it. Now, most places, if they're a well-run business, will have a listing for you of like, well, these are extra services and this is what we charge for those services. That makes it very easy to follow along, but if something comes up that's not on that list, make sure you ask about it. Don't just assume that it's not going to cost extra, because you always want to plan on a more conservative side of the most amount of money you're going to have to spend, and then hopefully you can budget down from there. Then you want to look at what is offered in the facility. So obviously the facilities are included in board unless you're on like a really big property where there's private areas that you're not allowed to go to or use. So you want to look at the size of the stalls, the size of the pastures. Do they have watering troughs or automatic waterers? How do they feed hay outside? Is it loose on the ground? Do they have big bales in netting? What does the facility offer you? Do they have indoor plumbing? Or do they have a porta potty? Do they have washers and dryers for your saddle pads and your blankets? Do they have, like the place I'm going has a shower? Like, okay, that's awesome. Utility rooms, lounges, tack rooms. Are tack rooms heated? Are they not? Are they temperature controlled to help with mold and stuff like that when it's really humid? Looking at the size of the arenas, what equipment is available from the barn for you to use? Do they have lunging equipment you can use? Do they have jumps or obstacles or barrels? Whatever you do for your free time and what your funsies is, do they have that stuff for you to use? Do they have trails that they offer, for boarders to use? So lots of things that you want to consider that, you can find that information usually online, but if there's something specific you want to check into, make sure it makes it onto your questionnaire list so you remember, hey, I wanted to really look at this and see what it looks like. So that is kind of the section of looking at costs and inclusions. It's not an all-inclusive, rundown, but I will show you when we get to the questionnaires a little bit what that layout can look like and hopefully help you guide what questions you're looking to ask or have answered on your quest to find a new barn. So now you've found your potential barns within your area that you're looking. You've investigated a little bit online to try and gather as much information as you can about costs and what's included at that facility. And now it's time to schedule a tour and create your questionnaire. So scheduling a tour was probably the most stressful part for me because I have really high social anxiety, which is hilarious that I do like YouTube and TikTok because it's kind of like an outlet and it kind of helps me practice like speaking. But I'm super anxious to make phone calls. So my number one go-to was email. I usually found a business email through either Facebook or the facility's website or the trainer's website or information. And I reached out that way via email and just immediately with the things that I would not compromise on. I found this information on your website. I'm interested on, if you have any availabilities or if you have a wait list. Everything looks good except there are, these things that I for sure know I'm looking for and I couldn't find any information. Could you elaborate on, X, Y, Z? That way they can email you or contact you back. And if the answer to one of your non-compromisable, that's not even a word, but if one of their answers is no to something you're not willing to compromise on, then okay, goodbye. Candidate gone. Easy peasy. You didn't have to meet anyone in person. You didn't have to stress out. You didn't have to do any of that. So it's like a preliminary interview. That's how you have to think of this, is you are interviewing the barn you're going to, and sure, they're doing a little bit of interviewing back to kind of get a feel for what kind of a boarder you would be, but you're really interviewing where you're gonna be keeping your pride and joy, okay? So this is like the preliminary testing the waters kind of stage, okay? So if you can't find an email, which is definitely something, I had 2 barns I could not find a business email for, but they did have social media. So I reached out to them through like Facebook Messenger or Instagram that way to kind of do the same thing. And I did get responses back from 2 of the businesses that way. So that was really nice. And the third way, good old-fashioned phone call. Not a fan. I did have to do that for one lady because the barn owner was actually in Ohio showing with her team, and the assistant trainer at the barn was like not linked up to their social media or email. So the only way for me to kind of ask preliminary questions was to call her because there was not an email, and she had requested that I call her and not talk over Facebook Messenger, which I understand like from a professionalism standpoint, but from a social anxiety standpoint, that was really like my heart was pounding the whole time I was on the phone. I had my questionnaire and was just like reading like a robot down the questionnaire to get everything done. And so those are basically the main ways you can inquire. You can also, like my friend Alicia did, just walk into a barn if you have, some idea that they offer bordering. If they have boarding for the public, that's what I'm trying to say. You can just go in, and presuming it's a well-run business, there's usually a barn manager or the owner on the property at any given point in time within reasonable business hours. So that's an option too. I'm not. Social anxiety says, nope, we would never do that. We would never just walk into a barn and be like, hey, can I board here? So yes, that is kind of the summation of scheduling your tours. You're doing, all this preliminary work up front. You're finding a place that meets your minimum requirements. Now you're scheduling to go and actually see the place. Super exciting, super overwhelming, super anxiety inducing. So how do we make sure that we get all of our specific questions answered and make sure that we don't miss anything that could be really important to us? And that's where the questionnaire comes in, because it'll help you, as long as you're not too anxious to actually go through the questionnaire. That happened to me once, and I definitely missed out on some questions that I wanted to ask. But the questionnaire is going to help guide you in your questions in your in-person tour when you're on the property and you're actually looking at things. So let's go ahead and get into the questionnaires, kind of go over the sections, and then we'll take a look at a couple and give you kind of an idea of what they look like. Okay, so I have pulled up a couple of questionnaires that I created prior to going on some tours at different places. So I've blocked out the names, but basically I went in and I filled out information in the big sections that we talked about: board, training, farrier vet, extra fees. And I filled out all of the information that I could based on websites and social media. So for example, this place, board was $775. I already knew they had 24/7 access to hay indoors and outdoors. They had well-bedded stalls, small group turnout. This place had an extra fee for grass turnout in the summertime. Okay. Odd thing I've never heard of before, but apparently it was a thing. So I needed to find out how much extra that was going to cost me. Required training, simple yes or no. And then if you want to, dive deeper, if I wanted a lesson, do they offer them? What is the cost? Who are the trainers? Do the trainers do training rides if you have a horse like mine that doesn't behave all of the time? Then we've got some random questions. This was supposed to be in a different section. It's actually down at the bottom here, but it got mixed up in translation. So we'll just skip that for now. Farrier and vet, are they on a rotation? Is it 6 or 8 weeks for farrier? Who is the farrier? Do they have recommendations? Do you need to find your own? Do they use whatever vet clinic you use currently, or are you going to need to switch? Do they schedule twice a year vaccinations? That's the most common thing. So that's something to consider. Then I've got extra fees. Is there a fee for, fly masks, blanketing, easy yes or no, and then a space for, putting down the cost of those things. And then additional questions is the important thing. So am I allowed to film for YouTube and TikTok? That is a huge thing that I do. Am I allowed to jump my own horse? Even if that's just lower jumps or pole work, kind of left room for specifications. How often on average do fees and costs increase? What type of amenities are there? I really want a functioning indoor toilet. So that was a question on every questionnaire I had. Do they have an indoor wash stall for giving horses baths? What does the tack room look like? And then I make a things to observe section. And this is just where I put some things that I really wanted to keep an eye on, like how big are the arenas? Could I set a good course of jumps? What do the jumps look like? What does the fencing on the pastures look like? How clean is the barn? Do they look like they take pride in their business? And then I leave a note section down below. So if they tell me something important that I don't have a space on here for, or that they feel they need everyone to know, then I can go ahead and write that down there. Like one place, you had to put down a deposit of a month's board to claim that stall. And they kept that until you decided to leave because they didn't want people leaving in the middle of the night. So that was basically you had to pay a deposit of 1 month's rent of board. Sorry, not rent. A 1 month's deposit of board plus the first month's board, which got so expensive, and that easily took this place off of my candidate list. We'll look at a couple other ones. So we've got this other barn. It had 2 barn areas. One was attached to the indoor and called the show barn. One had a lower barn, which was the under part of a cow barn that had been converted. So obviously prices were extremely different. So that was good to know. Question, is tax included in the cost of board, or is that added on after the fact? Here they had the dimensions of the arenas and of the stalls. They had commentary about extra fees and stuff like that. I saw that they include sweet feed in their board. I don't want to feed sweet feed because my horse will get way too hot and it's not nutritionally good really for them to be just on sweet feed. So can I supply my own feed, or are there other options? Again, we've got fleas. Good Lord, I really need a nap. We have the fees for fly masks and blanketing. Here is our required training section. They did not require it. I had listed here for the cost of lessons or training rides with their trainer. And then farrier and vet, those questions are the same. Here I wasn't sure if they had a program or not. So is it our discretion or is there a schedule we can hop on? And then same additional questions, a little bit different. Are they open 7 days a week for places that didn't exclusively state that? What are the hours every day? Can I still film? That sort of thing. I removed the can I jump on my own because at this point I had already determined that yes, I can. So I didn't need to ask that question. And then kind of similar things. This barn I actually had previously leased a horse from, and I knew the intention was to do a tunnel from the lower barn into the upper arena. And if that was the case, I would have considered the lower barn with the lower board fee because I wouldn't have to walk outside in the winter. I ended up not touring this place because I got into my current barn before I could get this scheduled, but this is just another example. And then we've also got another one here. So board again was kind of higher. It was not including tax, which they did specify. So if you add on the 5% business tax, it was even higher. Training is not required. However, it's really hard to get lessons scheduled at this place. So you're either in a weekly lesson program. They prefer doing that over training rides. And there wasn't a lot of flexibility to work with. So it was kind of, although it's not required, it's either you do it or you don't. There is no in between. This place, you paid for a stall, but the horses are outside 24/7 unless there's bad weather. To me, paying $780 for outdoor board basically was just not going to happen. So as soon as I heard that, I automatically removed this place from my list of potential candidates. They do come in for grain. The stalls are cleaned twice a day if they are inside. But the bedding was like even more minimal than the bedding that I have currently at the current barn that we're at, which is a huge problem for us. They did have consistent hay to munch on throughout the day, including grass without having to pay an extra fee, so that was good. Again, cold threshold for bringing them indoors. Are they out in the rain? When do they bring them inside in a storm situation? So I had more weather-related questions for this place, knowing that if he was here, he was going to be outside all the time. And then we've got the same questions for vet and farrier. Fly mask was really the only thing I had a question on because I knew they already do a $5 blanket change fee, and it's $5 per time they have to change it. Here they actually, I didn't know if I could jump my own horse or not, so the answer was actually no, so that also ruled out this place. And yeah, so I printed these off and took them with me on my tour, and it really kind of helped me stick to my questions and make sure that everything got answered that I wanted. And it was very helpful, and I highly recommend using some sort of format like this. Okay guys, I hope this video was helpful. I'm gonna try and cut it down in editing because it's become kind of a long video, and it's, you know, when it's the sit down and talk type video and you're in an echoing room, it's just not that much fun. So I hope this helps someone. I just feel like this sort of stuff is not talked about or discussed, and I know I'm a tiny channel, but even if I can just help one person, that's my goal. So if you have any questions or concerns, leave me a comment down below and I will reply as soon as I see it. If you have any tips or tricks of your own that you'd like to share with everybody else, go ahead and comment those as well. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you guys in part 3. Bye.